Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is Friday, July the 26th, 2024. It has been 3,832 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 156 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years and 153 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. There is a link in the podcast description. The Russia-Ukraine war report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission: the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. The policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States, and to a smaller extent Germany, is a failure. We assess that the risk of a serious international incident is increasing due to Moscow's belief that NATO is unlikely to respond. 2. Russian losses of armor, mobility and personnel are unsustainable even for Moscow. 3. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine remains unsuccessful in de-Sovietizing its field commanders and meeting its obligations to properly train all new troops, resulting in preventable battlefield errors. 4. Russia will continue to make tactical gains during its current offensive, but the lack of strategy, low troop morale, poor battlefield medicine, corruption and degraded logistics make it highly unlikely that Russian forces will be able to exploit any new breaches in 2024. 5. Continued delays in the delivery of promised military hardware, munitions and funding continue to prevent the Ukrainian armed forces from reaching their full combat potential. 6. We maintain that without a solution to restore air parity that slows the use of Russian glide bombs, Ukrainian troops will continue to be forced to withdraw as Russia destroys every defensible position and location. 7. Russia will continue to commit increasingly worse violations of international humanitarian law until international watchdogs and Ukraine's allies take a unified and firm stance. 8. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. 9. Russia's sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which has destroyed over 80% of its combined thermal and power plant capacity, is a continuation of Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. 10. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine. Russia doesn't stop targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure with glide bombs, drones and missiles. On Thursday, Russian attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure killed at least 3 and wounded 17. Russia launched 22 Shahed-136 one-way drones and 1 Iskander-M short-range ballistic missile, with 20 UAVs intercepted. Power infrastructure was targeted with damage reported in the Zhytomyr and Chernihiv oblasts. Now for today's action report summary. On Wednesday, Russia carried out 149 assaults. Through July the 24th, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks was unchanged and remains below the linear trend line. The VKS carried out 58 airstrikes, dropping 79 bombs on civilian and military targets. Russian ground units carried out over 4,800 fire missions with tubed and barrel artillery. I have an update on the Russian drone strikes in Romania, accidental, later in the podcast. Now let's talk about what happened on the battlefield, and this would be a good time to open up our Russia-Ukraine war map. Ready? Here we go. Starting in the Kharkiv Oblast, we begin in the Liptsi-Vovchansk area of operation, or AO. Fighting continued in Vovchansk, near Tykhe, and in the northern parts of Hlyboke, with no significant change in the situation. In the Kupiansk AO, fighting continued near Sinkivka, northeast of Petropavlivka, and in the area of Stepovanovo-Selivka. Ukrainian forces withdrew from Peshchane, and Russian troops are now 7 kilometers east of the Oskil River. We were informed that the situation is stabilized for now. In the Svatovo AO of the Luhansk Oblast, Russian assaults east of Stelmachivka were repulsed. Further south, near Crimea, Russian forces conducted assaults east of Makiyivka. The head of the Luhansk Oblast military administration, Artem Lysogor, wrote that the last 3 civilians in the village were convinced to evacuate after 20 months of Russian artillery strikes and bombing destroyed every structure. Based on the new information, we moved the line of conflict east of Makiyivka instead of in it and reduced the grey area. Fighting also continued in the direction of Nevske and the Serebryansky forest. Now let's talk about the Donbass and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. In the Siversk AO, Russian assaults on Verkhnyokamyansk from Zolotarivka, Spirne, the direction of Ivanodarivka, and in the area of Mykolaiivka were repulsed. Russian drone video confirmed that Ukrainian forces remain in Ivanodarivka, clarifying the line of conflict and the grey area, which were adjusted. The number of attacks in the Kostantinivka AO declined after Russian attempts to find weak areas were unsuccessful. Russian forces tried to advance in the direction of Maiske and Grigorivka without success. Russian reports and geolocated videos showed fighting on the edges of Kalinivka, and Russian assaults continued in the canal district of Chasiv Yar and the forested area near Ivanivske. Russian forces continued their assaults in the Toretsk-New York AO, where Ukrainian forces continued to hold their defensive lines. New video confirmed that Russia advanced in Zalizne last week. Based on the new intelligence, we moved the line of conflict west. Fighting continued in Pivdenne and New York, with no changes to the situation. In Southwestern Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces carried out 43 assaults in the Pokrovsk AO, taking advantage of the withdrawal of the 31st Motor Infantry Brigade near Progress. Russian assaults in the direction of Alexandropol were repulsed. Otherwise, Ukrainian forces are straining to plug a new bridge at Progress. Fighting was ongoing on the outskirts of Vozdvizhenka, Timofiyivka, Ivanivka, Vesele, that's the one west of Progress, the southern edge of Vovcha, and the western part of Yevgenivka near the Vovcha River. Ukrainian source Deep State reported that the 31st Brigade was able to stage a successful breakout from the Encirclement, with support from the 47th Brigade. The new bridge enabled Russian troops to advance along the railroad grade to the southwest and west on the T511 highway. Russian forces also control most of Novoselivka-Persha, with elements of the 47th Brigade continuing to hold their defenses in the southwestern part of the settlement. Russian forces remained stuck between Netailove and Karlivka, and Russian mercenary Melblogovo Gonzo claimed there was, quote, tactical success for Russian troops in the area of Nevelske. After 2 days of failed assaults and heavy casualties, Russian forces entered a brief operational pause in the Vuhledar AO. Fighting continued in Krasnogorivka, where NASAFAR information for resource management systems suggested Ukrainian forces had been pushed into the northwestern part of the settlement. In our assessment, a withdrawal from the settlement is a when, not an if, but it is not imminent. Fighting also continued in the center of Paraskoviivka, near Kostiantynivka, and west of Solotka. In the Vremivka AO, Russian sabotage and reconnaissance units were operating in the area of Velika Novosilka and Rozdolna. It was spicy in occupied Crimea. There were reports that Saki military airfield near occupied Sevastopol was hit by multiple Ukrainian drones, setting off several explosions. Russian propagandist fighter bomber confirmed the attack but didn't provide any details, only writing, quote, "This morning is not good again." Up to 13 explosions were reported, with some captured on video. On social media, local residents reported there were secondary explosions, and multiple ambulances were arriving at the military base. Online source Radio and Nukes, which has an excellent track record, posted that the Russian S-300V air defense battery in occupied Novostepove, south of Jankoy, was destroyed in the July 21st drone strike. That's one of the attacks that the Russian Ministry of Defense said all drones were intercepted. A high-resolution satellite image was available before the attack, confirming the battery's assets. Satellite images shared by Saiba Boroshno from July 24th show that a 9S-19 radar, 3 9A-84 launchers, and 1 9A-83 launcher were destroyed. Here's what we know about the situation in Romania. Romanian Foreign Minister Luminița Odobescu wrote on Twitter, also known as X, that Russian drones violated Romanian airspace on July 25th and debris had been found. Quote, "More heinous attacks have been perpetrated by Russia against Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. Debris has been found on Romanian territory. We have informed and are coordinating with our allies on this matter. Romania strongly condemns these irresponsible actions." Unquote. During the July 25th attack, 2 F-18 fighter planes with the Finnish Air Force assigned to NATO alliance defense in Romania were scrambled. There were multiple reports that Romanian air defense shot down 3 Shahed 136 UAVs in its airspace on July 25th, but there wasn't an official confirmation from Bucharest or Brussels. A video circulating on social media claiming that Romanian air defenses shot down at least 1 Russian drone over Ukrainian airspace is misattributed. Ukrainian radar information showed the drones were launched from occupied Crimea, flew along the Ukrainian coast, and then entered Romania on 3 different flight paths. The Romanian Ministry of National Defense confirmed there were 3 potential crash sites identified near the village of Plauru, and that at one location investigators verified the debris found was from a Russian Shahed 136 UAV. We had reported that 3 explosions occurred near Plauru on July 24th. Predictably, NATO's acting deputy spokesperson Matthias Eichenlaub said there was, quote, "no information indicating any intentional attack by Russia against Allied territory," while calling the incidents over the last 2 days irresponsible and potentially dangerous. Journalist Alex Raufoglu asked the US Department of State spokesperson Matthew Miller if the violations of NATO airspace required, quote, "decisive action or response from NATO." Here is Mr. Miller.
So I'm not going to speak to that matter only because there is still an ongoing investigation into what exactly happened and how it might happen, how it might have happened, and I think it's not appropriate for me to comment on it in advance. But obviously, we fully support all of our NATO allies. The president has made that clear from the outset of this conflict and from the outset of the administration.
Is there any discussion going behind the scene between the allies?
I'm never going to talk about private discussions. Alex, I'm going to move on only because
The head of the Department of Emergency Situations of Romania, Raed Arafat, appealed for residents along the Ukrainian border not to ignore future air raid alerts. Quote, "They don't just give for the sake of giving. There are people who take their work very seriously, and when they consider that an alert must be given through raw alert, it means that this alert is justified. We apologize if it causes a disturbance, but at the same time it is for the safety of the population." Unquote. Nicolae Ciucă, the president of the Romanian Senate and president of the National Liberal Party, called for negotiations with Ukraine and NATO to gain permission to intercept Russian drones and missiles over Ukraine. Quote, "We cannot shoot down missiles or drones from Ukrainian airspace, no matter how close they fly to Romania. Such a thing is illegal. If we look into our airspace, we see that we have nothing to shoot at. In order to change this state of affairs, Romania should negotiate with the leadership of NATO and with Ukraine conditions for the use of our air defense systems in Ukrainian airspace." We agree. The continued policy of appeasement will only mean more, what NATO call it? Unintentional attacks. If they are so unintentional, how come in 29 months a Russian drone or missile has never violated Hungarian or Slovakian airspace? I'm just asking questions. The Russian chargé d'affaires was summoned to the headquarters of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Romania after it was confirmed that Russian combat drones crashed near Plauru. The Russian diplomat was told about, quote, "the irresponsible character of the military strikes, including in the immediate proximity of the Romanian border, which endangers national security." They were also informed that Moscow is responsible for the deteriorating security situation in the Black Sea due to its war aggression against Ukraine. We are pretty sure Moscow knows that and continues to get exactly what it wants. Here is my theater-wide update. The Defense Intelligence Directorate and the Security Service of Ukraine have started a program that will exchange Ukrainians in Russian captivity for traitors, collaborators, and captured Russian spies. DIU's spokesperson Andriy Yusov stated that the first and primary goal of the project is to publicly disclose information about convicted Russian agents, traitors, and collaborators who cooperated with or assisted the Russian occupation forces in the war against Ukraine. The alleged assassin of linguist and college professor Irina Farion was arrested, the Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine Igor Klimenko reported. Vyacheslav Zinchenko, 18, is a player with the Dnipro football squad, soccer if you speak American, and has been charged with premeditated murder. Ongoing audits of funds and military aid sent to Ukraine uncovered another $2 billion in Presidential Drawdown Authority that was assessed using full replacement value instead of depreciated value. On June 21, 2023, the Pentagon concluded that $6.2 billion in PDA had similar errors. The Government Accounting Office concluded that $2 billion more in PDA is available due to the accounting error. The report also stated there wasn't any misconduct, and the errors are because the Foreign Assistance Act does not clearly define certain terms, and the DoD lacks PDA-specific valuation guidance. And that's what we know. Join me again on Monday, and have a great weekend. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.